Audio Jungle.
The next team that we are going to get into is the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm gonna Bengals fans are gonna absolutely hate me when we do this, and I'm just gonna start off with this, and then we can get in their 2023 season. This team absolutely worries me to the max, and I'm not even slightly exaggerating. First, I'm going to talk about Joe Burrow's health. Um, it seems like every single offseason going into a season, he has something wrong with him that makes them have a slow start. Before it was ACL recovery, he like got his gallbladder removed or something like that the year before, and then he had like a thumb injury. Has a thumb injury this year. So let's go back to since Joe Burrow has entered the season. 2020, 0-2 start, torn ACL, 10 games. 2021, 0-2 start. He played 16 games. That's the year they went to the Super Bowl. 2022, 0-2 start, played 16 games, lost to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. 2023, 0-2 start, played 10 games with a thumb injury. At some point, he is going to have a complete offseason, because if you're starting out every single season 0-2, you might get to a point where they have been able to overcome it in the past, but it might get to a point where they're not going to be overcome that 0-2 start.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if you were a Bengals fan, if your starting quarterback that you just paid all this money to could have a healthy offseason and not go into the new season kind of behind the eight ball. But if you're getting a healthy Joe Burrow, regardless of how deep into the season it is, unless it's like, I mean, if it's 2 weeks, I'll bank on Joe Burrow turning them around, but it's got to be exhausting if you're a Bengals fan. Like, can we just keep this guy fucking healthy for one time? And like, you see what happens when he plays a full season, but that's the outlier here.
And on top of that, he has had multiple season-ending injuries, not just the unhealthy offseason. He has not played in seasons, so
yeah,
it's upsetting. But I hope that Joe Burrow can stay healthy, because like we said, like he's one of the best in the league and fun to watch. And when he is clicking, like there's nothing better. Next, this defense is flat awful now. There was a point in time where this defense was could be feared, but ever since the departure of Jesse Bates, which we saw him in Atlanta this past season, like really flourish, he's a special player. And when you have somebody
crazy,
when you have like a Swiss Army knife like that on your defense to utilize, it's extremely hard whenever you miss him. And I don't think any single player that they have drafted to replace whoever they have lost out over these last few years has developed or stepped up in a major way for them to feel comfortable about where they're at on defense. So I think as every year goes by, as they are removed from that Super Bowl run, I think that this defense has continuously gotten worse and worse. And we'll go into that when we talk about the additions they made this offseason. So I just think that you are losing out on that talent on defense due to having a talented offense like a Jamar Chase and T. Higgins.
Yeah, they have. I'm looking at it here. Their positional spending is actually not terrible. I mean, besides safety and tight end, their positional spending is not bad. Like, they're putting dollars into their defense and their offense, but it just, the guys that are leaving are more important than the guys that they've brought in at this point. So
yeah, exactly.
I don't think the spending part of it is necessarily an issue, but like, you do have to still fill out a defense, and losing Jesse Bates sucks. They just lost Awuzie, like we said in that Titans video. There's another big guy, defensive tackle that they lost, DJ Reader. They just lost him. So like, three big name guys that they've lost the last 2 years that have been significant pieces of that defense.
Cornerstones on their defense. And then the last thing I want to get into is the mismanagement of the T. Higgins situation. You tag him. He was clearly unhappy. there was an opportunity this offseason to go and receive draft capital from him. And now it seems at this point that he might walk for nothing because you didn't act on any of that draft capital. And I think that might be one of the biggest blunders that you can have. I understand that he's an important piece to your offense. You like him. Joe Burrow likes him. But at a point, if you're not intending to pay him, you need to have that conversation internally and be like, okay, he has requested a trade. We have had the entire offseason to deal with this. He told us before the draft, and they acted on nothing, and he's going to play on the tag this season. But it seems like after the season, he is just going to walk because I don't really foresee there any money being opened up for a T. Higgins contract when you have Jamar Chase, who is going to end up ultimately making probably like Justin Jefferson, maybe a little bit under his number money. So you can't pay both those guys. So the T. Higgins situation, I feel as if they blundered because they could have went and got either players, some draft capital, brought some people in of positions of need that they have to use, but they didn't do any of that. And if he walks for nothing, I think that needs to really be highlighted next year.
Yeah, I just don't see how they're going to be able to pay Jamar Chase and T. Higgins after already paying Joe Burrow. I was actually just looking at this Jamar Chase contract because I didn't think he got his extension yet, and I was correct. So they're going to be in some murky waters here in these next 2 years. And on top of that, was it Trey Hendrickson was requesting a trade too? You're probably your best player on defense.
Yeah, I don't know much about that, but I remember that, but I can't speak to it. So sorry about that.
Let me see here. Okay, so he did request a trade, but he has since then committed to the Bengals. So I think that's all right. But I mean, that's obviously not. The fact that he brought that up is still not great.
Yeah, it seems that there might be a little bit of like what do you call like fractured type relationships within the organization, like with T. Higgins, with their star players, where I mean, it might not be the ultimate distraction when the season starts, but they've had so many distractions this off season. So just something to think about, obviously. All right, let's talk about their 2023 season. They went 9-8. The first thing I think about that is how did they do that? They went 6-3 at home, 3-5 away on the road. Who was their quarterback last year? I just completely fucking blanked on his name.
Jake Browning.
Yeah, Jake Browning just like randomly came out of nowhere and actually like had that offense like looking decent. So shout out to him for stepping up when they needed him. But ultimately, like going 9-8, like really didn't do anything for them. They missed the playoffs. Joe Burrow was hurt. T. Higgins was hurt. Just kind of it felt like a little bit of a throwaway season for Cincinnati.
Yeah, and it bumped them to 18th in the draft because of it. So, like, it was pretty much lose-lose at that 9-8 record. I do have here that they did start off last year at 5-4, and then they lost Joe Burrow for the season come week 11. Jake Browning did hold them together, took them to 8-6 heading into their last 2 games. But ultimately, it didn't really matter.
And they could have the last game of the season that they won against the Browns. The Browns they benched every single player on their team, right? I think so.
The Browns did, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean,
I'm pretty sure as well. So it's irrelevant.
They had like a free win pretty much at the end of the year. I mean, they won, but still, the entire team sat out that game.
Yeah.
Like I said, it felt like a throwaway season. It's hard to really evaluate like how the Bengals do if Joe Burrow isn't out on the field. But yeah. I think the one thing that we can take away from last season is the defense took a massive step back, and Joe Burrow keeps getting hurt, and I don't know why. And it's been a lot of fluky stuff, but maybe better line play. Like, can we say that? Like, I'm not sure.
I mean, I think that certainly plays a role. So 2021, they were 30th in pass block win rate. 2022, they were 30th in pass block win rate. And 2023, they were 27th in pass block win rate. So I would say that's probably not a bad move to protect your star quarterback.
Crazy idea.
Yeah.
Literally,
yeah, who would have thought? If you pay your starting quarterback multiple $100 million and then don't pay anybody to block for him, it's going to be hard for him to do his job.
I completely agree. So let's go into the additions that they made. I don't know what they did. They drafted Amarius Mims, who was, I don't know how good he's going to be, but it seemed like every single person who covers the draft that he was the definition of like a project tackle.
Yeah.
So he'll be behind like Orlando Brown and Trent Brown, which both of those players, I don't really, those guys really don't do anything for me. They're all massive, but other than they like signed Gesicki, like love Gesicki's my guy, but like they don't really have like a need for him. I feel like, what did they do? What did they do this offseason? Maybe you can shine some light on it. Because I didn't like anything.
I mean, they did bring in defensive lineman Sheldon Rankins. They brought in 2 new safeties, Von Bell, Geno Stone, and then Zach Moss. But like, I don't know. I'm not like thrilled about those if I'm a Bengals fan necessarily. They did draft Jermaine Burton and out of Alabama, the wide receiver, who I actually liked. I think he actually might fit well as the third receiver next to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And then Chris Jenkins, the D tackle from Michigan. From what I remember, he was kind of a beast. But who knows? I mean, who knows? You add him in this defensive line with Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard, you might get something out of him. I also don't think he's going to come in and start right away, but I think their issue and a lot of these questions are going to be amongst the Cincinnati Bengals like secondary unit, not necessarily their pass rush and whatnot. So that's where I would be most concerned from a defensive perspective if I'm a Bengals fan.
What'd they lose?
So they lost left tackle Jonah Williams. They lost cornerback Awuzie. They lost DJ Reader, who is a massive loss for them. They lost Joe Mixon. They lost Tyler Boyd. They lost Irv Smith Jr., Nick Scott, and then Max Sharping.
Yeah, it feels like the Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon going out of the building like feels like a little bit of like an era of Bengals football's over. Those guys were, that core was together. It feels like for what, like three seasons, which feels like forever nowadays. So, yeah. I mean, I would have to say that losing Tyler Boyd probably matters. Joe Mixon, they didn't want to pay him, so I understand that. But I don't know. It feels.
I think DJ Reader might have been their biggest loss.
Definitely. Oh yeah, definitely. DJ Reader from a run, like he just clogged the middle. Yeah.
I was just gonna say they were like the number 1 run defense when he was on the field, and they were the worst when he wasn't. So
yeah, he's good. So and that really goes back to the original point that I made at the top, like these defensive departures that they keep losing out on every year. I mean, unless if Chris Jenkins is generational, like
maybe,
I mean,
they
got worse on defense. Like
yeah,
I feel like I feel like if you look at what they did on the offensive side of the football and the defensive side of the football, I feel like they just got worse on both sides, unless if you disagree and can talk me through it.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I do think they did get worse on both sides of the football, but this kind of reminds me of like the Buffalo Bills situation. Like, as long as you have Joe Burrow and he's healthy, I think they're going to be okay. Now, Josh Allen doesn't get hurt like Joe Burrow does, so it's a little different from that viewpoint. But when Joe Burrow's playing and he's healthy, like he's obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
No doubt. No, I completely agree with that. I think what scares me real quick about Joe Burrow is, as of right now, all of the reports that are coming out about his thumb is that it's like still bothering him. It is July. And if he's not at a point like camp starting up next week for all these NFL teams, if he's not at a point where he's a full participant in this entire process of camp and this thumb still bothering him, I'm going to personally have caution on this football team next season.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if that's still the case and the thumb is still an issue, then I think there is reason for legitimate concern because you're going to have a special season from Joe Burrow if your defense has gotten worse. Luckily for him, they still have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, but that's probably not going to be the case next year. So, Joe Burrow, you better make the most of it. You might have to backpack the Bengals this year.
And the other reason of why I'm hesitant of this Bengals team is this division's always extreme. They're not playing in a cupcake division. They're playing in probably one of the hardest divisions in football. And I think the Ravens are still I think the Ravens are a better football team than them. I think the Browns are a better football team than them. And I could see, and usually every single season, the Steelers somehow pull out a win against the Bengals and they split. So if you're telling me that there's two teams in this division who are better than them and they're probably going to split with another, I don't know. I'm not loving the outlook on this team so far of what I've seen.
I mean, I think at the very worst, they split in this division with the Browns, Ravens, and Steelers. Okay. And I understand they lost pieces, but somehow they won 9 games last year without Joe Burrow. So maybe Zach Taylor's just like a really good head coach, and he just isn't deserving the credit or he just hasn't gotten the credit that he deserves. I don't know. Like, did anybody realistically think they were going to win 9 games with Jake Browning taking over for half the season? Probably not.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. It's hard to really evaluate Zach Taylor because of the Joe Burrow situation, where like if he's getting hurt or missing games, like obviously like they went back-to-back seasons where they went to the Super Bowl, lost in the AFC Championship. I would have thought this year would have been a really great year to see what was the possibility for this team. Like, how deep of a playoff run can they make again? Like, are they that other team who's like really building something special? And then fucking Joe Burrow gets a thumb injury and misses out on the whole season. It's hard to evaluate them as of now. And I feel like it could teeter either way. It's kind of like I said about Trevor Lawrence. The only thing that we know for a fact that's going to stay the same for the next 5 seasons in Cincinnati is that Joe Burrow will 1,000,000% be their starting quarterback no matter what. And whatever else, everything else looks like receiver departures, coaches departures, whatever that might look like, Joe Burrow will be the thing that stays the same no matter what, because he's that special.
Yeah, and that's how you have to have some glimpse of hope if you are a Bengals fan going into every season. Obviously, the injury history has not been great, but if you have Joe Burrow playing quarterback for you, then you're going to be in a great spot 99% of the time.
All right, let's do 2024 predictions. Listen, I think the Steelers are sneaky one of the worst teams in the entire NFL. And I know Tomlin never had a losing record, blah, blah, blah. We'll get into that when we talk about the Steelers. I think that the Steelers are going to be that bad this year that they're last in the division. I'm going to slate them at last. And then I think who's going to win the division is a 2-team race between the Browns and the Ravens. And real quick, for everybody who starts freaking out, I predicted that the Browns were going to win the division before the season last year, when everybody had a hard on for the Bengals. Everybody loved the Ravens. I was like, I think the Browns are going to go and win this division this year. They didn't win the division last year, but they went 11-6 and they had a great season. So I'm not just saying this to like get clicks or whatever. I think that it's a 2-team race to win the division between the Browns and the Ravens. And then I think that the Bengals are firmly underneath that. If some things go their way, wins wise, they might be able to slate into that second spot. But I think it's going to be hard for them to outplay both of those teams.
So before I give my prediction on the Bengals record, I would like it to be known that they do have the sixth easiest schedule in the NFL this season. However, they do play 3 short week road games, which is, and then week 15, including week 15, which is a part of a run of 3 games in 10 days. So they have the easiest, one of the easiest schedules, but they're in a spot where they're one of a few teams that plays 3 games in 10 days, which is not great. Their rest advantage is literally terrible. Regardless of that, they have Joe Burrow. And if Joe Burrow is healthy, I think this team goes 11-6.
Terrible take.
I'm looking at this, like I said,
there's
Josh
just
Allen.
so much more that goes into a football team than just having a good quarterback.
Yeah, but there's so many ailments to a team if you have a good quarterback. I think Zach Taylor's actually a decent head coach. So I think that helps too.
It definitely does. I think that there has been an absolute renaissance over last year of the running game and defense. And I don't think that their running game's that great. And I don't think their defense is that great. And I think that those two things allow you to enhance your team, your overall team play. And I think that that's something that the Bengals are extremely lacking, and that's why I'm hesitant on this team. I don't think that I don't think it's unfair to say we talked about it the other day. Every single team in the NFL rolls around the 9 to 11 win mark, and I think that is a fair mark to put them in. But if the Bengals win 11 games, they had an extremely special season.
Let me read you the list of quarterbacks that they're going to end up facing. You already said you're slating the Steelers in to finish last, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they've got week 1 against the Patriots. So that's going to be who's their quarterback? Jacoby Brissett.
Happy.
Okay.
Nah, I'm just kidding.
They've got week 2 against the Chiefs. Obviously Mahomes. They got week 3 against a rookie in Washington. They've got week 4 against a second-year quarterback in Carolina. Week 5, they've got the Ravens. Week 6, they've got Daniel Jones. Week 7, they've got Deshaun Watson. Week 8, Jalen Hurts. Week 9, Aiden O'Connell. Week 10, Lamar Jackson. Week 11, Justin Herbert. 12 is a bye. Then they've got Justin Fields / Russell Wilson, Dak, Will Levis, Deshaun Watson, JJ or Bo Nix / Zach Wilson, and then Russell Wilson / Justin Fields. So they probably play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 legitimate quarterbacks in 17 games.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I see where you're coming from, but also at the end of the day, all those guys are starting for a reason. It could go either way. I don't think that it's just a shoe in because they play.
I don't either, but I agree with you, but I'll take Joe Burrow over a lot of those guys.
Oh,
if it comes down to I'm not saying obviously I'm going to take Joe Burrow over 29 other quarterbacks, probably 28 other quarterbacks, but
Joe Burrow,
if it comes down to the matchup here, Patriots, Commanders, Panthers, Giants, Raiders, Chargers on a who knows what's going to happen year, Steelers twice, Titans, Broncos, I don't know. I kind of like the way this is lining up a little bit.
Yeah, I think that if you would have looked at the end of the Eagles season last year when it was we play the Giants, we play the Cardinals, we play the Commanders, we play the Jets, the worst team in the NFL, and then they go and lose all of those football games. So I don't they have to go out and win the games, obviously. And as for Joe Burrow, I think that he's probably the 4th best quarterback in the NFL, probably 3 or 4. I think it's Patty Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and then Joe Burrow. And if somebody yelled at me and wanted to switch Lamar for Joe Burrow, I wouldn't be pissed. I'd be like, all right, sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah. So like that's kind of just how I'm looking at this. My original number that I had for them was 12-5, but I think that's too bullish. So
Wow.
I bumped it down one. Yeah.
Wow. Hey,
Uh,
Noah Malone is expecting a big season from the Bengals this year. So
I am.
me and you are
I'm going
completely
with
polar
11
opposite.
wins.
Me and him are completely polar opposite of this. I wouldn't be shocked if they won 7 games. I wouldn't be shocked if they won 9 games. I think that they're between that 7 and 9 range. If they make a super wild card weekend, I'll be shocked. But I think that this team is. I think that there's a real chance that they don't make the playoffs this year. So
I wanted to go on
tale of
record
two cities.
that my 11 win season is based off of Joe Burrow playing at least 16 games.
Yeah, every game. Every game. Like he needs to play
15
game.
games. 15 games.
All right. Well, hey, me and you are polar opposite on that, but Bengals fans, let us know what you think of the state of your team. Because I think it's an interest. I think that we're going to look back on this team, and I think that they're going to be in a situation like how like the Bills were and some of these other teams who have all these like expensive players. I think that they're going to have to strip it down to the studs at some point and be like, okay, we have Burrow. Like he's our guy. We don't have to worry about that. Let's supplement some offensive pieces around him. And like, let's start getting some like really nice key pieces on like the offensive line, the defensive line, like the important places on the field. And I think that once that they do that, I think that this team, like I said in the Bills video, set yourself up success for multiple years down the line. And I think that having these 2 wide receivers which is a great problem to have. I mean, they've been balling out and they're really good, but having these 2 wide receivers that are going to demand so much money ultimately is a negative thing for team building, especially when you have an expensive quarterback.
Yeah. So hopefully all Bengals fans figure out who they want to come in and be their wide receiver 2 after this season. You could get an early you could get an early head start in on that. So
definitely,
if the season doesn't go well and say Joe Burrow's hurt by week 10, you might as well start looking at wide receiver 2s.
Man, I hope he doesn't get hurt. If he gets hurt again, they need to get rid of every single person on the offensive line and start fresh.
Yeah, you're probably right.
All right, brother. So, well, hey, Bengals fans, let us know what you think.
Let me know, Bengals fans. Go Birds.
Audio Jungle.